primary sugyas. The first is discussing 4 examples and perhaps some more examples of something which is chayiv in dine shomayim, but pater in dine adam. 2 categories of this halacha would be things which are just grama, a number of which were mentioned in the Mishnah, which is why it's brought in here, as well as hezek sheni nikar, where you've ruined something without actually changing it in any physical way. Then we'll get into more of the halachas of the shmira that is required in order to be pater from having blocked your animal from causing a damage. So let's begin. The Gemara says that we have Brisa. Rabbi Yeshua says there are 4 things. List of 4 things. And somebody who does these 4 things is pater in a dine adam. That means in a human court he cannot be held accountable and doesn't need to pay for it. However, in a dine shemayim, that is through the heavenly accounting, he's going to be held responsible and he's going to need to pay by heavenly intervention. So what are the 4 things? So they are as follows. Number 1 is somebody who breaks a fence in front of someone else's animal and causes that animal to escape. He didn't actually steal the animal, but he indirectly caused that person to lose it. And all these 4 are the category of grama, where you indirectly caused the loss. However, you did cause it, and it is because of you. In dine adam, we can't be mechayiv, in dine shmayim, we can. Next on the list is somebody who bends a stalk that belongs to someone else in the path of an oncoming fire, and it causes it to be burned by the fire. He didn't actually set it on fire, but he did put it in a place that the fire was able to get to it. Third is if you hire witnesses to testify against someone, and the 4th is if you know testimony to exonerate somebody and you do not testify on his behalf. Now the Gemara discusses each of these. The Gemara wants to narrow down specifically the case of all of them, and then the Gemara is going to bring other examples that could have been listed here as well. So the Gemara says, let's narrow down each one. So first of all, we break down the fence of someone else. What type of situation are we referring to? If the wall was a strong, healthy wall, you would have to pay for the wall. You may have not been chayiv directly for letting the person's animal out, but you ruined his wall, so you should have to pay for the wall. So therefore, we have to be referring to where it was a weak wall, which was going to fall anyway, and therefore you can't pay for that. Next is where you bend somebody's stalk in front of the fire. If the fire could reach it through a normal breeze, to a normal wind, so that you would be chayiv even in a dine adam, because that's literally considered as if you burned it. So it's talking about where you could not reach it through a normal wind, it could only reach it through a wind she'enim, so an abnormal wind, and that's what happened. And yet you're still chayiv in dine shemayim. Now Rav Ashi has a slightly different shot here. He says we're not talking about where you bent it into the path, but we're talking about where it was going to get burned anyway, but what you did is you covered it. By covering it, you made it to Talmud. You made it something covered, which halacha is that a fire is pater on something that is covered. And therefore, you change the situation so that the owner can never be repaid for his loss. Third is where you hire false witnesses to testify against someone. The Gemara says it can't be referring to where you yourself gain from it, because then you would have to pay what you stole. You illegally took the person's property, so you have to give it back. It's referring to where you hired in order to have someone else win money away from a third person, but you gain nothing personal from it at all. Now, the 4th thing was if you know testimony and you don't offer it. So here the Gemara says we can't be referring to where there are 2 witnesses, where you're one of a pair of 2, because there the Torah says that you're chayiv for that. It says lo yagid v'nasa v'inay, and that's an avera. So therefore it's pashut that it's chayiv in a dine shomayim. So it must be referring to where it was one individual, yourself were alone. Well, the reason why you are held accountable is because even though you couldn't sway the court to paskin because of your individual testimony, you need 2 witnesses to make a psak. However, you could have been mechayiv him to swear. And it's quite possible that he would have declined to swear and instead be willing to pay. And therefore, by you not saying testimony, you caused the loss to the person who you could have testified in his behalf. Now the Gemara says there are a number of other examples of situations where you're pater in dine adam and chayiv in dine shemayim. Most of these are hezek sheni nikar. That is, you caused the thing to be ruined without actually doing any physical destruction. So the examples are as follows. If you do work with parduma water, such as you use it as a weight on a scale to help figure out the weight of something on the other side of the scale, or if you work with an actual cow, which could have been a paraduma, those postle both of those, and therefore, though you didn't physically change it, you postled it, you completely ruined it from its value. And all of these are in a brisa or in a mishnah that you're pater in a dine adam and chayiv in dine shemayim. Next is if you put poison in front of an animal and he goes and eats it. Third is where you send the fire in the hand of a cheresh of a katan and it causes a damage to happen. These 2 are clearly grama, not hezek sheni nikar. The fourth one is if you scare someone, you make a loud noise, a shock in his ear, and cause him an injury in that way. So you didn't actually touch him, yet you would still be pater b'dinei adam and chayiv in dinei shemayim. Now, another example is if your jug broke in a Shas Rabim and you leave it there and someone trips on it, or if your camel fell in a Shas Rabim, you didn't pick it up fast enough. That's a machlekes. Rabbi Meir says you're chayiv for that hezek. The Chacham say you're pater b'dinei adam and chayiv in dinei shemayim. So the Gemara says, yeah, there are a number of other examples. We didn't mention all of them. The reason why we said these four is because these four is a chiddush that you are pater b'dinei adam and chayiv in dinei shemayim. I would have thought otherwise. I would have thought that in dinei shemayim you shouldn't be chayiv either. So, for example, when it says that you knock down the fence, you would have thought that since we're talking about a weak fence that's supposed to be knocked down anyway, as we said before, therefore you should be pater even in dinei shemayim. No, you are chayiv in dinei shemayim for knocking it down. Now, second case was where you bent the stalk or you covered the stalk. So as far as the bending of the stalk, we said that it has to be that it was reached by the fire through a ruach she'eina mitzuya. We could have thought that the person shouldn't be responsible for that. He could have said, how would I know that a ruach she'eina mitzuya is supposed to arrive now? Yet the chiddush is that you are responsible for that. Next is where he covered it. He could have said, I was trying to protect your thing from the fire. I wasn't intending for it to be burned and you lose the payment for it. And therefore you would think that he's pater even in dinei shemayim, where he hired false eidim. So you would have said that he could say, why should I be chayiv in dinei shemayim? Why did he listen to me even though I paid him? If Hashem said not to say false eidus and I said he should, why should he listen to me? It's his own problem. That's like we say, you're still chayiv in dinei shemayim. And the last case where you know testimony and you don't say it, so you may think that he may say, why should I be chayiv in dinei shemayim? Who says I caused you any loss? Just because I could have testified and been chayiv mashul, maybe he would have sworn. How do you know that he would not have? Mashman, you are pater in dinei adam, but you are chayiv in dinei shemayim. Okay, now going back to the Mishnah said that if the if your animal was behind the wall and the wall fell down at night, or it was broken out by robbers, you're pater for that, because the Gemara is considering that you're an einus. So the Gemara quotes the statement of Rabbah who says this is only if it dug out the wall. That is, the animal caused the wall to fall, which you could not have possibly known, and therefore you would be an einus. Meaning it happened at night, the animal caused it to fall, you didn't do anything, there's nothing you could have done. Now the Gemara asks a few questions and therefore ends up changing Pshat and what Rabbah actually said. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? It's only if the animal dug that you're pater, but if you didn't dig, then you would be chayiv. What are we referring to? If it's a strong wall, so then if it didn't dig, it just fell. For sure, you're an einus. How are you supposed to know that a strong and healthy wall would fall? So it has to be talking about a weak wall. So it's talking about a weak wall. So you left your animal protected by only a weak wall that's slated to fall. Why should you be pater just because the animal decided to dig and knock the wall down? What you did is improper. You put it behind the wall that's not going to hold it anyway. So it's what we call chilasu b'shi of seifa b'einus. So that at first you did something negligent and it ended up that an einus is what actually sprung him. Now, chilasu b'shi of seifa b'einus is a machlekes. Do you mean to say that this opinion here holds that chilasu b'shi of seifa b'einus is pater, and that's why you're pater in this case, but the one who says that it's chayiv would disagree? So the Gemara says, okay, no. So our Mishnah is talking about where it's actually a healthy, strong wall. And really, the halacha is that since it's a healthy, strong wall, you're pater even if the animal didn't dig under it, even if it just fell on its own, because it's an einus either way. What did Rabbah actually say? Rabbah was talking about the later case in the Mishnah, where it says that if he left it in the sun, or he put a chereshek of cotton in charge of it, and it went out and it caused damage, there you're chayiv. On that halacha, Rabbah said, even if it dug out from under the wall, but you had left it in the sun, there you're chayiv. Meaning, even if what actually happened was an einus you could not have expected, you're chayiv anyway. Because this is all considered to be a pshia. It's not chilasu pshia seifa b'einus. You put it in the sun, it's going to cause it to dig out. So even if it digs out, it's not an einus if you put it in the sun. And the reason is because since you put it in a situation which is very stressful and uncomfortable for it, it's natural for it to find some way to escape. It's going to make or create any opportunity that it can to get out. The Gemara now moves on to discuss the next part of the Mishnah, where we said that if thieves came and broke the animal out, they are responsible for the damage that happens after. So Gemara asks, that's pashut, since they pulled it, pull the animal out. They did a meshicha. They were kaineh. It now belongs to them. They obviously have to return it because they stole it, but it belongs to them as far as responsibility. It's meshicha and nishina rishos, and therefore they, of course, are responsible for it in all ways. What's the chiddush of this Mishnah, that they take the place of the owner as far as responsibility for the damages? The Gemara gives two answers. The Gemara's first answer is that you didn't actually pull it, you never did a mashiach, and therefore the thief was never a kaineh. We're talking about the thief just stood in its way, maybe a group of thieves stood in its way and caused it to move in a certain direction, and that's how the damages happen. Since you never did a mashiach, there's no kinyan, is a chiddush that you're chayav for standing in its way anyway. The Gemara says, similar halacha we've seen, the Rabbah said the name of Rav Masna, where in the Rabbah said the name of Rav Masna, the name of Rav, that if somebody caused an animal to eat the grain growing in his friend's field, he's chayav. The Gemara says that's pasha. The Gemara says he didn't actually push it, he didn't actually grab it by the animal and move it onto his friend's field, but he stood in its way and caused it to head in that direction. So same malacha here. Our second answer is that Abaye said to Rav Yosef that you once told us that he hit it with the stick. In that case, that's what how that situation is there. So the Gemara says, yeah, here also could be that the thief hit it with a stick and caused it to move in that way, and that is not considered to be a kinyan, but it is a type of theft, and that's a chiddush you're for that. Gemara now goes to the next line in the Mishnah, which gets a little bit into the law of shemer shemasol the shemer. If you give something to a guardian to take care of, and then he gives it to someone else who's responsible there. So the Gemara says in the Mishnah had said that if you give over the animals to a shepherd, and the shepherd then takes the place of the owner. So Gemara said, it's possible we already had this Mishnah on Daf Mem Daled. There we said that if you give your animal to a shemer, shemachinam, shemasachar, nesischar, or a seicher, they all take the place of the original owner. So why is this being repeated? So Gemara says it must be referring to not that the owner gave it over to a shepherd, but that the shemer gave it over to a shepherd. That you had the shah, nesischar, shemachinam, all these, they went and they gave it to a shepherd, so the shepherd takes the place of the shemer, and the shemer is now out of the picture. So the original shemer is gone. In place of them is the shepherd, and if the owner has a problem, instead of him going to the person that he gave it to, he has to go deal with the shepherd. So Gemara says this is a kasha on Rava. And we're going to have two versions of this Gemara. Going to the first version, it's a kasha and then an answer, and it's going to the second version, we start with the answer, and it's a proof to Rava, and we'll reject that. So going to the first version, it's a kasha on Rava, because Rava said a shemer who gives to a shemer, the original shemer is chayiv, because the owner could say, well, you had no business giving it to someone else. I trusted you to swear that nothing happened to it. Now that you gave it to someone else, I don't trust him to swear, and therefore I'm holding you liable for everything that happens, because I only trusted you, I didn't trust anyone else. And here you see that the original shemer is out, and he does not have to take responsibility. So it's a kasha on that. So Rava answers, we're talking about where it was the student. It said that he gave it to a shepherd. Why does he give it to a shepherd? Why didn't he say he gave it to a different shemer? That implies that he was a specific shepherd. He was his student. He was someone who works for him. Therefore, the original owner was aware that he was going to give it to him, and he's not able to say, I didn't trust him, because it's understood that he's on the team here, and he'll be involved. Now, the second version of this is that the Gemara makes that diak first. The Gemara says that the Mishnah seems to clearly be saying you're giving it to a roya only, meaning to his student, which means only in that situation is the original shemer pater. Otherwise, it will be just a random shemer. The original shemer would be chayiv. Proof to Rava, who says the shemer that gives over to another shemer, the original shemer is still chayiv, because he's not trusted, because the original owner could say, I trusted you to swear, I didn't trust anyone else. So Mishnah says no, it's not necessarily a proof. The Mishnah said he gave it to a shepherd, could just be talking about that's the normal way things go. Normally, you'll give it over to a shepherd. That's the situation here. It didn't have to be there. It could have been anyone else. You'd be pater either way. Not like Rava, because we're holding a shemer, shemasal shemer is actually pater. No proof to Rava, depending on who. The Gemara now begins a lengthy sugya called Pruta de Rav Yosef. This is in Bachagim between Rabba and Rav Yosef. What is the halacha of a shemer aveida? If you find the lost object, so you have to hold on to it until you can return it. During that time, you are a shemer, you are guarding it. What is your responsibility to that lost object? Are you a shemer chinam or are you a shemer sacha? Shemer chinam is a person who's watching for free without getting paid. Shemer sacha is a person who is getting some personal benefit from what he's doing with this object. So the question is, the shemer aved, is he getting any benefit from it or not? And there's two versions. Obviously, it seems to be like he's getting nothing from it. He's just watching the lost object. You need to have a chiddush to say that he's getting something from it, and there's two versions here. Rabbi Yosef is the one who says that he's actually Shomer Sachar because he's getting something from it. Rabbi is the one who says he's not. What's Pshat in Rabbi Yosef? So the Gemara's first Pshat is that since he's doing a mitzvah and dealing with this lost object, if someone would come knocking on his door asking for tzedakah during the time he's dealing with the object, he would be patur from giving it to him because Isaac ben mitzvah, patur min mitzvah, and that's a benefit that he gets from the object, and therefore for that little thing, that small amount, that pruta, he ends up being a shomer sachar. The other pshat is Rabbi Yosef says, since the Torah gave him a mitzvah and the Torah made him do it, the Torah is making it like he's a shomer sachar because he's having schar from it because it's the Torah's obligation for him. Gemara has a number of proofs on the subject, which we'll see on Daf Nun Zayin.